Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm remoting in, Cormac. I'm remoting into the podcast.
Where are you remoting in from?
I'm remoting in from a similar latitude to you.
Oh, you're right. You are.
That's right.
You
I'm
actually, I sent you a picture of the 1 day, let's just say 22-hour drive it would take for me to get from where I am to where you are.
I appreciate you saying it like that rather than the other way around. Actually,
yeah,
that's very nice. You're a giver.
You've been doing enough driving, so
yeah.
and it realized that not only is it like a straight shot, but it latitudinally, if that's the word, and it's going to be now.
It is.
You literally are like almost diagonally, or not diagonally, straight across, horizontally straight across. What
kind of architect are you?
I don't know. One that apparently doesn't know the difference between horizontal and diagonal.
You're scrambled, man. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Straight across the U.S. 42 degrees north latitude, and coming to you via Starlink tonight as I record. So it's interesting to finally have moved out of the home that we've raised our kids in for the last 11 years. And
wow.
Yeah, it was quite a push at the end because we basically moved stuff into U-boxes, the U-Haul version of those pods that you see, and put stuff into storage and headed north and not knowing where we're going to land. So we're hashtag van life, hashtag motor RV life, whatever you want to call it, as we figure out where we're going next in this adventure.
Hashtag trailer troxel.
Trailer trash troxel.
I wasn't going there.
Yep.
Just
too late.
Trailer troxel.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave out the trash part.
It's there now, man.
I can't take it back now. So it's been fun so far. I don't know how long it will be fun being in a trailer for who knows how long, but it might not be too long. We'll see what happens. But we're in Oregon now. We're in Southwest Oregon and heading into the Pacific Northwest. We'll figure out where we land, but it is kind of funny that we're basically horizontal, not diagonal from you. And it's only about 2 days worth of solid driving away.
Yeah, no stopping for gas or brakes or anything like that. Just straight driving, foot on gas pedal, and
right
running out there. I'll be there. I'll see you on Saturday.
Okay, cool. And I'm coming to you from my remote recording studio in the front of my truck, my pickup truck. So this is the official Archispeak recording studio.
Wait, hold on. You have a pickup truck. You're living in a trailer.
Right.
Can we revisit that where we were living?
Yep. It's my life now.
So, yeah, much like me, you vacated a house that, you've raised kids in, made memories in.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so something that we did on our way out, basically, moving sucks. There's no way around that. It's terrible.
I'll attest to that.
Packing within every square inch of your life in these things to get everything to fit, and then you finally we slept in our trailer in the driveway the last 2 nights because we had packed everything, right? So luckily we have this apartment on wheels that we can roll around, and so we had packed the beds, we had packed everything, right? So that was kind of like the final days, and mentally you just kind of check out. I don't know, how many times you've moved. I've moved a lot over my life, but I actually bought the house that I was in to avoid moving. Like that was the number one reason, because it was we were renting it, and then they decided to sell it, and we're like, we want it because we don't want to move. And so moving, it was like we had new carpeting put in a few months ago before we listed the house for sale, because it was like the original rental crappy carpet that the previous landlord had put in. So we put in some nice carpet and stuff, and it wasn't that bad, like moving all the furniture around to get the rooms freed up to carpet, right? So it's like, okay, I really thought moving was not going to be that big of a deal. and it kicked my ass. It was and I have a broken finger, and I totally like re-injured it like 3 or 4 times during the packing and the moving of furniture and stuff. And it totally killed me to move. And so you know how you kind of mentally just check out
Yeah.
of the house, you start to disconnect. You like, we're moving on. We have to start letting go. And I have to say, like, it was not emotional until like we went through with the kids every single room in the house and the backyard and the side yard and everywhere, and just recalled memories. Like we even had Grandpa come
Mhm.
over and just recall, like, remember what happened in here, and like people just come up with things that just strike them in the moment. And it's so interesting to kind of tie those memories to places, at least for us, for our family, right? And it was so cool. Like Grandpa was talking about the movie night that he remembered in the living room, and they're talking about remodeling this room and what happened in that room. And it was so cool to kind of go just space by space. Come even just as an architect, right, who designs space for other people, and how meaningful a box, a space that people can inhabit can actually be, is was super interesting. And I take zero credit for this at all. It was totally my wife's idea. She wanted to kind of go through and do this. And I have to say, like, after it was all over, like it just became emotional, right? It was
Yeah.
so interesting to kind of go through that experience and really like connect more deeply with something I had already kind of been processing and letting go of over the previous few weeks.
Yeah, funny enough, so we were there for 14 years in our Maryland home. My daughter was 6 months old when we moved in. And so she
Wow.
really knew nothing but that home.
Right.
And, it was way too small for us. I mean, we had, I think I've said this, several times, but it was 985 square feet for a five, person family.
Yeah.
It was tiny. But, and honestly, everybody was just like, I can't wait to get out of here. I can't wait to get out of here. Um, knowing we were going to move into a place that was, bigger. We actually almost doubled the size of what we were in, which, yeah, it's funny as we're here and we still can't figure out, it's just like, how did we live in that small house? But we did the same thing. We were like walking around and, after it was empty or mostly empty. And, it was kind of funny. It's like not all of the family was there.
Right. Right.
My middle child was already on his way to college and everything else. And so, we really didn't have everybody there, but, the people that we had there during the times, like we did have him there early when we were packing. And then he stayed in Michigan when we came back to Maryland. And then it was just kind of like several trips back and forth, back and forth, back. And so, but each of us did that. Each of us was just like, well, what are you going to miss about this house? And they did that. They recalled, these memories of, it's just like, oh, I remember, a Christmas picture of you,
Right.
like peeking around the corner. And so I had like, my daughter, who was, the star of that picture, do the same thing, as
Reenactment.
as a 15-year-old,
Yeah.
and then she was just like, I remember that, I ran into, Brendan, and I bounced off of him and I hit the corner of this wall here, and I had to go and get stitches, and it was, it was his birthday. We were getting ready to leave for his birthday party, and he was crying and upset because he had, hurt his sister, and then also that he, his birthday was ruined. And, we just like started going through all of these things of like, I mean, you can't help but have good memories of a place that you spent 14 years in,
You
or
were right.
for you, 11 years,
Right.
all the trials and tribulations of your, renovations. And I mean, I kind of felt like I was on your journey, as long as we've known each other and been talking about, like all the different renovations that you went through, converting that back area into like living spaces. And, your office space and stuff like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
the journey of, I mean, I even have memories of your house,
Yeah, right.
which is,
Just because of this podcast. Yeah,
or you sleeping on my couch,
right.
you know, in a very tiny house.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and
Yeah,
just,
it was interesting to kind of relive that for sure.
yeah,
It's also interesting to hear that you guys did something really similar.
yeah. I mean, like, again, you just, even people who are, like, I know a lot of people who get very emotional, when they're leaving, and my wife being one of them. And she was the first one to, like, really want to be out of that house. She was not really attached to it, but
Mm-hmm.
of course, waterworks when we were
Mm,
leaving. It was just me and her sitting in this absolutely empty house. We were moving the very last bits of everything. We got a trailer to, like, move all the last little things, and it was just me and her in the house. And we're sitting here, and we're looking at it. We're just, like, getting kind of choked up over the fact that literally, like, we have raised our children. They, like, our kids, like, my middle child started kindergarten and graduated high school in that house.
mm-hmm.
My oldest was in second grade and graduated. In fact, not only graduated high school, but at least, got his associate's degree in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, my daughter went through, like, infancy to eighth grade in that house. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, you couldn't help but just, like, get kind of, like, choked up over the fact that, this little teeny house that, we sort of always had one foot out the door,
Yeah.
really was connected to us.
We always felt like that too because we had rented it for 5 years before we bought it, and even after we bought it, we still didn't like change anything for the longest time because you just get so used to it being not your house that there's this transition period to it becoming your house, and then you change things and then you sell it, right? Like the house has to feel a little betrayed in that it was like you've made it, and it is funny because you drive away and I'm thinking like, well, I left it better than I found it. I, in so many ways, left it better than I found it. And that's something I kind of a recurring theme in my life. It's like that's one of my things. Like I like to leave things better than I find them. And I think that comes from, the way I was raised. It comes from being a Boy Scout and leave no trace. And, you always leave a campsite better than you found it, cleaner than you found it. Right. It's things like that. And then just with the mark that I can leave on the world, even if it's just my piece of property, right? Like that's the goal, is to leave it. And so I feel like I definitely achieved that there. And at the same time, it's like that part of it didn't last very long, right? It was like, do all this stuff so that you can enjoy it. And then we were like, you know what? Like we actually have other dreams and goals and we want to go pursue those. And that's not going to happen here with this. So we have to change that. And so it's funny because we did all this work and people are like, oh my God, you just did all this stuff and now you're going to sell it. That's crazy. Right. And it's like, yeah, but it makes sense on one level and I get it. It doesn't make sense on another.
Right. Well, what's, I think about that. And so we were longtime renters because, well, again, we were always one foot out the door. So
Mm-hmm.
almost every summer, like clockwork, we were like, okay, this is the time we're going to move. And then, decisions were made. It's like, well, boy number one is just starting high school. We might as well wait, until he finishes. He's, grown up with all these people that he knows, and let's, just go ahead and let him. And then by the time he's getting ready to graduate, the other one's a sophomore in high school, and says, oh, we can't move because of that one. And there was enough gap between, my middle son and my daughter to not, to say, okay, if we are actually moving, this is the best time because we've got a gap.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a gap to, before she starts high school, and really put a big decision on her. It's like, you really want to move? I mean, these are the people that you've known your entire life. And, so, but thinking about all of that. So thinking about, it's like we weren't walking away from a house that we, did all of this work to, but we did do work to it because, even though we were renting, we were still living there,
Hmm.
and it was still ours. And so I still, like I would fix, everything, and I would, like, do everything. And if I knew we were going to be there that long, I probably would have renovated, like finished the basement and things like that, and like really done, like lived a little bit, differently in the house if I knew then that 14 years later we would still be there.
Yeah, right.
But I will say the one thing that I do kind of like, the one thing that really got us, like that, like really just kind of like broke us both, was we're standing in the threshold between the kitchen and the dining room, and of course, what's on the wall is, the little marks that we did
Mm,
of their growth throughout the years.
right.
And it, to try to, I'm going to keep talking so I don't get choked up about it, but it's just like you literally see like the growth
Yeah,
of
right.
your children
Yeah.
throughout their years, and like we had to leave that behind,
Yeah.
that memory of the last 14 years
Well,
we
that's
left
poor
behind.
planning on your part, Cormac. You know what I did? I did it. We have our own stick. And you know why? Because the old house that we were in, we did it just like you did. We had it on a post that was in between the dining room and the kitchen. And I scribed that over onto a furring stick, and we used that furring stick from then on. I even had to extend the furring stick at one point because actually two of my boys outgrew the length of the stick that I started with, which is insane to me. And then we still have it with us, and it's going to live in our new house as just one of those things. But I totally, because the kids were so little when we left the other house, I'm like, I'm not making this mistake again. It's going with us, and it's going to stay portable. We had to have the portable markings.
That's a great idea. And yeah, it was actually funny. It's to just watch, um, my middle child, Brendan, like, him, so you know how
Yeah.
tall he is.
Hmm.
Just like, here's my oldest. He's like slowly catching up to me. Didn't quite catch me, and then here's me, and I swear I started to go in the opposite direction,
Yep.
and and
Exactly.
then
Yep.
here he is. He's just like, you know, he's this tall. Then, like, he's as tall as his brother. Now he's as tall as me. Now he's 3 inches taller than me, and he was just like, dude,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
crazy.
And it's fun because every year we would do like the difference from the year before. So we would mark it and the date. We'd always do it in May every year. We'd mark it and we'd also write down the delta from the previous year. So you'd write down their height, but also the delta from the previous year. One year it was like over 4 inches, and it was like, how is that possible? It's really amazing to watch kids grow up. And then yeah, remeasuring ourselves over when the kids are like, okay, you're next, and it's like, oh no, I don't want to face this because I am shrinking over the years, right? Each a little bit every year. It's like,
Hmm.
oh god.
It's just like, why don't we just go ahead and, when your sister was 6, I'm just gonna erase her name and put my name there.
Yeah. Benjamin Button.
Exactly. Like, like my height goals.
Height goals. Yeah, so that was it. Now we're living in a trailer park, an RV park in the Pacific Northwest. It's pouring rain right now, and
Yeah.
might get a little bit of snow tomorrow, but the air is fresh, I have to say. That's a good thing,
Nice.
moving from Southern California for sure. And it's not as noisy. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous out. So I'm excited about whatever comes next in this adventure.
I'm excited for you too. Well, more, you need to settle down so I can have an excuse to come out and visit.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
I don't have a pickup and a trailer right now, so I can't.
You got to just you got to nonstop it all the way. Or you could just fly.
I
I
don't.
don't
I
have a
don't do
place
that.
for you to stay yet, but
Yeah.
at
See,
some
that's
point.
why I'm patiently waiting for you to
Yeah.
have a couch for me to crash on.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So I mean, well, here you go. Big changes. Here we are now, rolling into December, and both you and I have, like, completely changed our lives from where we were to where we're going
Right.
this year. It's been, quite, I mean, both of us have taken our jobs on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one constant is that, we're still employed and still with, being, having the luxury. In fact, actually, so I was on a call today, and, um, he was with the guy who, we brought in to kind of do some, QC for our project. And we were sitting here talking about some roofs and things like that. And I was sharing my screen, and I had, uh, in the chat, I told, the other one of the other people that was on the call that, wasn't him, because he was kind of like, he's more remote. Hey, can you start sharing your screen, because I need to go and pick up my daughter. And, and I told everybody, hey, I'm going to need to either cut out or switch before, um, uh, before X whatever time,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can go and get my daughter. And so I've already like left the house. I've already gotten in the car. I switched, my Zoom chat, Zoom meeting from the computer to my phone. Dude didn't know any of this. He just like, it was just seamless. Before I walked away from my computer, I'd already switched to my phone. I was still talking about like, some details that we need to work on, or some ideas and stuff. And then jumped in the car, plugged it into the car, had it in the audio and stuff. And he was like, don't you have to go and get your daughter? I'm like, I'm sitting um, in the pickup line right now. He goes, man, the times are changing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was like, it just like summarized, like it literally like summarized my entire year and your
Yep.
entire year. It's just
Right.
times are changing. And
Right.
so, yeah, crazy. And then just the, like with you, I mean, you're sitting in your car.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're using your trailer Wi-Fi or just
Yeah,
data,
I am.
but okay. But I mean, think about that. Think about like the freedom that we talked about of you being able to do that, and think about like just changing expectations in offices now.
Right.
I mean, this year, I mean, what's funny about this year, from my perspective of not just what you and I have done, but the way that the profession has somewhat changed continuously evolving and changing, is there are those offices that, still want the butts in seats.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's those offices that are making concessions, knowing that they want good people. And if good people means that we're going to hire remote workers, or we're going to, hire blended workers, or we're going to hire, butts and seat workers. I mean, those are the things that are the opportunities that are out there now. That this guy that we brought in to, QC our project, he used to be a principal in our office, and he retired.
Mm.
And, he just by chance, we were like, who would be great to do this, like review this project would be this guy. And we reached out to him, because I mean, everybody's still looking for and needing more people. And so we reached out to him, and he was just like, yeah, I'll do it. And, it's been a great addition to, the project and what we're doing, and has been kind of guiding and helping us with his knowledge. But it was just like, you know, he's like, all these newfangled things that you guys are doing, are just like, just a great progression forward for the profession. And that's coming from a guy who, retired, God, I think 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's just like, it's amazing what the profession is doing now.
It is a
It really
mindset,
is.
right? It's not an age thing. It is a mindset thing. And it is interesting to see. I think I just saw some post on LinkedIn that was talking about the AIA's I guess it's the firm report that was just published for 2022. And one of the questions was, about remote work. And it was something like 67% are back in the office. It might have been higher than that. Don't quote me on that, but it was higher than I expected it to be. It might have been in the 80s, actually, now that I think about it. It was a very small percentage that was remote. It was like in the low teens, I think, for hybrid. So it is interesting to see that shift back to where it was.
Interesting. Because, like, I've talked with a bunch of people and they're like, yeah, well, sometimes it just doesn't make sense for me to come in. In fact, I was
Hmm.
just having this conversation. I went to a AIA Detroit meeting and it probably should have polled a lot of people, but, a lot of people that I was talking to is like, yeah, I work mostly from home. I mean, I do go in, when we need
Right.
team meetings and things like that, but,
Yeah. A couple
I
days a
still,
week or whatever.
exactly. And
Yeah.
in fact, actually, even one guy, he was, saying that like he just got an office, just like, and it's more of like a share workspace,
Hmm.
and he only uses that to basically kind of like have people come together, have meetings, have team meetings and things like that. But then every other time he's, out either, meeting clients or working from home.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting to see that it had shifted back. And I wonder, like you, I think, if that is just the official policy. I wonder what the actual behavior is, because I know a lot of firms have talked about the official policy is everybody's in the office 1, 2, 3 days a week. It's
Yeah.
this day, whatever. And the actual that what's actually going on is nothing like that. I mean, the office is still very empty, even on the days when people are quote unquote supposed to be there. Um, I wonder what that survey's results are actually saying versus the reality.
Yeah. So I could say that we're 50-50 is what our plans for the foreseeable future is a 50-50. And we don't mandate when you're going to be in. It's, project needs, convenience for you,
Hmm.
things like that. And so, a lot of times people are going to be like, hey, I'm going to be in the office, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If anybody else wants to, meet me there, great. And then, they usually do. It's just, and then other times it's like, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it in this week. Um, I'll just be working from home. And, no one bats an eye. I mean, because
Yeah.
the thing about it is the work getting done? Yeah, the
Right.
work's getting done. So,
Right. Yep.
like, the butts and seats comes from a term that
Yeah.
kind of coined when we were chatting about it. And it was just like, you don't, like, I don't need to stand over people to make sure that they're working because, one, we're all in the same model. We all have, tasks that are assigned to us. Everybody knows what needs to be done, and I can see it. I can
Yeah.
see work being done
Right.
in real time.
Right.
You
Yeah. You
know,
don't need to spend 2 hours in the car to do the same things. Right.
exact,
So
exactly,
unless it's for a specific reason, whether it's
right,
collaboration, urgency of some decision that needs to be made, whatever that is, right? Then, I mean, even that you could do digitally. So I think it's got to be more about collaboration or a specific reason. And I think one of the things that I see firms failing on is making a good case for being in the office, right? And so usually it falls back on, well, we're creatives, we're architects, we need to be together, and obviously there is something to especially emerging professionals overhearing the chatter, the talk. But even that, I think, is changing a lot, where people are finding comfortable ways to do that online. I guess I'm a little out of touch with what those ways are because I'm not in that kind of an office environment anymore. But um, it does seem like things are changing in the direction of digital tools for collaboration. Obviously, there's been a huge uptake of Mural and Zoom and things like that, where people are doing live collaboration online. But the there are benefits, but I don't think that firms have been very articulate about them, and because they don't necessarily know what they are, and nor do they have a vision that is exciting for people who would want to participate in that. Right? If it's just like going back to the office just to go back to the office, like I'm sorry, but people are going to want more than that, right? They're going to
right,
want the
exactly,
reasoning.
right, right. And yeah, that, yeah. Um, it's had this conversation with a friend at the AIA conference that basically was kind of appalled that we weren't back in the office, and I didn't get it. I didn't get the hesitation or the the rationale of why we need
Hmm.
it to be.
Hmm.
Because we've talked about it on countless occasions that you don't need them. I've figured out ways, because you're absolutely right. There is a huge challenge in mentoring new people digitally,
Hmm.
but with tools like Miro, with tools like Zoom, with tools that you know provide you this opportunity. But there's conscious decisions that need to be made in the way that you're working with somebody too, because first you have to recognize that oh, this is a person who doesn't have the same level of experience as me, or they're fresh out of school or whatever, and so there's different ways to deal with different people. And so, but especially when I'm dealing with somebody like that's fresh out of school or maybe a couple of years, and I'm giving them a task, and we're on a Zoom call, and I've got the annotate tools up, and I pull up either the whiteboard or they pull up some drawings, and we're sketching over it. Not only do I talk about like what needs to be done, but the why it needs to be done, and what the consequences are for, like, say, hey, if we don't show this detail, I mean, they could build it this way, or like, I always play devil's advocate. I always talk about cause and effect. I always talk about these things in a way to use it as a teaching tool to learn how to, like, half the time I'm kind of almost admitting to them, oh yeah, I had a project where this was where I kind of screwed up on something, and this is how you can not screw up on it. Like,
Hmm.
here's a way to avoid that problem, and here's what I learned from that. And and so when people make this almost like appalling mandate that's like, I'm so shocked that you're not at work, because how can you function as an architect, when you're not, like, face to face with somebody? It's like, well, guess what? Times are changing, and people who really want to be butts in seats will come and work for you.
Hmm.
People who don't want to be butts in seats, or want to be maybe butts in seats 50% of the time, well, guess what? They're going to come work with me,
Right.
and that's just it. And that's their choice, not, it shouldn't be the firm. And then there's going to be those people who's just like, look, if you don't want to be 100% here, then we don't want you. Okay, then guess what? The market out there right now is so hot that you can find a job that fits you better,
Mm,
because it
yeah.
probably didn't fit you in the first place.
Well, how many times now that you've been in Michigan have you been back to the office physically?
Zero.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought the number was going to be zero.
Yeah.
I do know that you've been back to Maryland a couple times. Don't tell the office
Yeah.
that. But
Well,
but I was pretty sure
it
that
was
you didn't
camping
go into
with a
the.
bunch of people. It
Yeah, I
was
mean
just
you were doing it for pleasure. It was or
exactly.
for various family reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was almost positive that the number was zero.
This is
And
number zero.
if you're a senior project architect and you don't have to go into the office because you're finding ways to get the job done, like, that is just part of designing the process. It is just
Yeah.
part of creatively coming up with ways to work around the obstacles that are out there. And if sorry, but if we can do it, like, seriously, anybody can do this. And it's
Oh
just a
yeah. Yeah.
refusal to think in those terms,
Right.
because it somehow makes you more comfortable with, you know, the way that it's always been done, or the way that it should be based on the way that it's always been done.
And think about, like, just the changing nature of how we interact with our clients anyway. And to be, like, mobile or flexible, or that kind of goes a long way to, like, letting the client know, hey, we're here to, like, you know work with you. And so, again, I sort of had to roll my eyes and say, okay, it's that's the way you want to do it, and that you will get the employees that want to be there 100% of the time.
Hmm.
I'm going to get the employees, that want to be there 100% of the time, 50% of the time, remote, however they want to work. But I know that they're going to work. Just
Right.
It's
You
just the
trust them
changing.
because they're
Yeah,
adults, they're professionals, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you see the rules or whatever that Musk put out regarding Twitter? And I just did a little bit of reflecting on this because I thought that as an architect, maybe I'm already a little bit jaded. It was pretty funny, right? Because it was like you have to fully commit. He had people there working, doing all nighters. They were sleeping on the floor in the office, and it's going to be. But it was something like crazy hardcore was something like the quote to pull this off. And I thought, like, okay, first of all, you literally can run your business however you want. And if you don't agree with the way somebody else runs their business that you don't work for, okay, but I kind of don't care, right? Like, there are some level of standards that you might have that are different from other people. And so kind of like we're talking about what it's like to work in an office and somebody saying you have to come into the office, like, if they are the business owners, they do get to decide that, but it doesn't mean that people have to agree with you and continue to work there, which is what we saw happen at Twitter, right? A lot of people left, or they were laid off or fired. I don't know whatever severance packages. It's been insane, and I don't necessarily, I definitely don't agree with the way that it's been going down. But at the same time, it is a private company, and like Twitter is not a public utility. It doesn't have to exist. Like, so, and I'm not like super tied up with it because yes, I've been a part of it for a very long time, but does my life depend on it? Absolutely not. And I definitely feel for like the people with the H-1B visas and things who they have a job, they get to be in the country on that visa. And if the job goes away, then what? That's got to be incredibly difficult. So I can't argue all the finer points, but I just thought as an architect coming at this, these leaked memos, these leaked emails as an architect and what the profession of architecture has been, it's like architecture has always been like that. And it's really interesting to watch the backlash that has happened based on the behavior, excuse me, based on the behavior that has been exhibited through these emails. And it's like, if you want to be a part of it, click on this link and you still have a job. And if you don't, here's your severance package. I mean, architecture's kind of been like that for so long. And I think it's really interesting. Like, I think it has totally skewed my perspective of like, you can totally run your business like that. I actually feel guilt for saying you can run your business like that, because I think like the rules have changed even more. Like, what is acceptable has always been skewed for me of like these are things that we do for the project. These are things that we do for the job. Even though I don't agree with those, and I've definitely talked about that on this podcast quite a bit, right? I don't agree with that myself, but does that mean that everybody should agree with how I see it? Absolutely not. It's just really interesting to watch the public backlash. If they only knew about architecture, what would they say about architecture? And I think like we were seeing the results of that in the last few years, especially, right, with unionization and the exodus, the quiet quitting, there's all various terms, right, that we've talked about for what's been going on in architecture, and even wider than that. But it is kind of I just thought it was interesting because I was thinking about it, and I'm like, man, like, he's running Twitter just like people have always run architecture offices. And everybody's freaking out about it. And look how long it took people to actually realize that this was not a good model for architecture. Right? It took a really long time for people to actually get comfortable speaking up about it. And I mean, it took a pandemic actually to kind of start to change things. And a lot of citizenship and advocacy and lobbying and, voting with their feet. A lot of people voting with their feet, going to firms that had different policies, or, I mean, there's just so much to it. I don't know if you had thought about that at all, but that's just a connection that I drew. It's like, wow, this sounds a lot like architecture.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about like how we, ruthlessly lay people off during, the hard times.
The downtimes. Yep. Exactly.
Honestly, not that much different.
Yep. I totally agree. And I was thinking about that, especially with really large firms, right? That we don't need to mention their names, but like they hire and fire like crazy. And why do they do that? Because that's their survival is based on that, right? But there's no apologies there. I mean, I'm sure it's difficult for people to lay people off, but at the same time, like it is a business decision. And I think what's interesting about this is how blended life has become between work and life and, family in quotes and business, and how blended and kind of weird that's gotten over the last few years. There's like these expectations that work is your second family. And I still think like capitalism kind of doesn't allow for that. I mean, there's definitely examples of companies who do operate like that, but hardcore capitalists who are out there, like billionaires who buy Twitter, have a different view of it. And it's just kind of interesting to watch all of this from the armchair.
Well, that what landed me in Maryland was 2008.
Mm-hmm.
We all know, or for those who don't know, I mean, the big recession where lots of firms, it was kind of it was the famine time of the feast and famine,
right?
Undulation of architecture. And so big firm that I interviewed with and, had received a offer letter from, if I would have gone to work for them within 6 months of being hired and starting with them, I would have been one of 60% of that office. Now, this is a huge office.
Mm-hmm.
This is a huge, well, let me just say, it was a huge office, but it was a huge firm, big office in DC, multi-city, multi-nation, offices for this firm. And they laid off 60% of their DC office.
Wow.
I mean, so
usually the last ones in are the first ones out, right? Like that.
Absolutely.
That, even though that's kind of a cliche, it is pretty true.
Almost the entire division that I would have been that I specifically would have been working in was gone. Gone.
Yeah.
And so, it's interesting that you bring up the kind of like the ruthless tactics that are going on in Twitter right now. It's been standard. It literally has been standard operating procedure for architecture firms for God knows how long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
totally.
and we've lived and you and I both lived through them on numerous occasions, you know. And so I've been lucky to actually be the one to keep their job. But unfortunately, and we've even talked about the long-term damaging effects that, practices like that has had on architecture and on, the experience, like that mid-level, that mid-career, mid-management kind of person doesn't really truly exist like in the profession right now. The 15 to 20 year person isn't really there, is in numbers that younger staff are in. And so there's even like a mentoring gap as well.
Totally.
So, anyway, yeah, wow. It's interesting to put it in that perspective, because I'm pretty sure that there's, numerous architects out there aghast at, what's going on at Twitter, and, rightfully so. But, how many of those either participated in or were victim of the same type of practices that occurred within our profession?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to think about sleeping on the floor, working on projects all night. And it's like, this is the culture of architecture, and it has been for so long.
I told you my very first day after graduation, when I started working for that small firm, the very first day I worked till 2 a.m.
Yeah. Welcome to the firm. See you tomorrow. You'll still be here, right?
I will. I say it as I, work till 2 a.m. and I did, but the partners were there too. So, I will say kudos to them, because they did lead by example.
It does make a difference.
It was a horrible example, but they still led by example.
Yeah. They didn't just say, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't ditch us and just say, enjoy it. I'm going home and I'll see you later. I mean, they were there, sleeves rolled up, doing the same thing. But it was just, it's just like, how do you get yourself in these positions? And
right, it's not normally like this, Cormac. Yeah.
How many times I heard that throughout that night, and how many times they proved that to not be true.
Right. Yeah, it's just wishful thinking. That's all.
Exactly.
Well, times are changing. If they're not if you're not changing, you're dying, right? So I feel like that has never been more true, as my future is unknown, and in some sense at least. And so anyway.
Well, let me welcome you to the 42nd Latitude.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Good to be here. I'm enjoying it so far. There's actually weather. There's actually seasons.
I hear it in the background. Some
you can hear it raining.
Falling. Yeah,
raindrops falling on my recording studio.
Exactly.
Right. We got thin walls here in the Pacific Northwest.
Don't make those pickup trucks like they used to.
All right, man.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. See all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what we're doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and don't forget to share it with your friends. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can find our entire catalog of shows. Talk to you soon.